Hello and welcome to another edition of the Low Code Cafe, episode number 113 for Wednesday, October 19th, 2022. Today we're going to tackle page view history and audit tracking, and I hope that'll be of interest to you. But before we do that, let me introduce myself. My name is Dale Warner. I'm head of support. Today on the call too, we have panelist Patrick Anderson helping behind the scenes to take notes and keep me on track. So Low Code Cafe is an event we do every Wednesday this hour to typically talk about low code in general and deal with some specific low code topics. We try to make it something relevant to developers. So today we'll be talking about dealing with page view history audit tracking, but we'll also get into our From the Trenches segment and talk about some hotfixes. Again, this is an item that we do, a webinar that we do every Wednesday, and we would love for you to participate. If you want to be a guest speaker, if you have things relevant to the low code community in Plant and App, we'd be happy to host you for that. And we've had several very successfully hosted events that come from the community, and it's always interesting to see what our clients are doing with the Plant and App platform. These webinars are recorded, so there's now 112 hours already on youtube.com/plantandapp. So do sign up for that and subscribe and set the alert so that you know when we post new content. Today's agenda, I'm doing the introduction and we'll talk about some hotfixes in our From the Trenches segment, and then we'll get right on into low code development. You can engage with us in a number of ways. You can use the chat window or Q&A. You can also raise your hand if you want to talk. And we have a feedback form. We would be very happy for you to leave us feedback on what you, on the comments you might have on this event, what you might like to see in the future. So from the trenches of support, we have some hotfixes to announce to our current version 1.22. We've previously released 12 hotfixes, and there are 5 this week, and I think there's some very good ones. So the first is about token names. Token names will now accept the underscore in addition to the alphanumeric characters. Previous versions of my tokens, previous couple versions back, we had 2 different interfaces to tokens, and one accepted a wide variety of characters. The newer one, the one that we've retained, accepted only alphanumeric characters. So that caused a problem for our clients who used underscores within their token names. So now this hotfix will allow you to, while those tokens were never broken, they couldn't be edited, and now this will allow them to be edited. We gave some consideration to whether we should be supporting other characters in your token names like dash or colon, other special characters, and came to the determination that anything except underscore is not going to be supported, and that helps keep you out of trouble when you're dealing with things like razor tokens. So we're mostly back to the way that we were from our previous versions, and hopefully that'll solve issues for those of you who are using underscores. Within forms, we've had a long-standing intermittent issue where the form layout changes didn't save under certain circumstances. So you would rearrange fields and then find that the changes didn't save. So that was found and fixed. We also had a couple of esoteric ones that the fields named B or event would break any action execution. So there were some restrictions, unpublished restrictions, and now those are gone. So you can have fields named B or event or anything else. But those special ones were breaking, and we had a couple of people run into that. And then there's a fix for file paths that weren't supported on our save file to disk action. That was really an issue that was found and was a problem for one particular customer. So there's one customer, I think, waiting for that hot fix. But if you run into it, that's the fix for that. And then we've also had this issue for a while where you could cause a workflow to become corrupt by removing the arrows and leaving some actions that were orphaned. The system now no longer allows you to save a workflow in that state. All actions have to be connected. And so if you run into if you are deleting and moving things around within a workflow, just make sure that things get reconnected so that there is a path for execution to hit your actions. But that one was kind of unfortunate the way that it was, because if you happen to encounter it, it corrupted it, and now this keeps the workflow from becoming corrupt. Beyond that, I'll just mention that we do another event every week, Fridays, the same hour. It's called Low Code Campfire, and we encourage you to come and join and be part of that. That's more of a conversation, and it includes people from support, from management, sometimes from development, and it's a great place to get questions answered. So we hope that you'll be part of that, and you're going to see in our in my presentation today that I'm relying on some things that we have a shared website called the campfire.plantandapp.com, where lots of bits of solutions and hints and tips and tricks are spelled out. I'm relying on various contributions in Campfire to build the solution you're going to see today. So definite benefit to being part of the Campfire meeting and gaining access to the Campfire website. So links for this episode, I'm going to post those now. And of course, those will be on our, let's see if I can hit enter here. There they are. Those will also be listed when we go to, when we post this on YouTube. So this will allow you to, there's a link there to let you register in advance for the Low Code Campfire. You can access our webinar recordings that I mentioned earlier on the Plantan App YouTube channel. Link there to the community portal, which is a great place to get questions answered, and also to access our live support, which goes on 2 or 3 times a week, free service, and our webinar feedback form that I mentioned, where we'd love to hear what you have to say about this webinar. This is Low Code Cafe number 113, and I've put together a document of reference materials. Hopefully everything's in there, but if not, I'll add to it as we go along today. So that gives you access to be able to see all of the bits and pieces that you're going to need to be able to paste into the solution today if you decide to implement this one. Great, so let's get started. Again, any questions along the way, feel free to pop them into the chat or the Q&A. So let's talk about what we're going to get to happen today. We want to provide a selective page view history and audit tracking. So we're going to pick out pages where we want to know whether people have visited there, and we're going to do it for 2 purposes. You can do it for either one. We're going to focus more on page view history, but it also allows for audit tracking. If you have a scenario where you want to make sure that people want to know what people have viewed specific content, then audit tracking might be for you. We're going to use it so that we can see who's currently viewing a page. This solution uses tokens and workflows primarily to both to record the visits that you're making to specific pages, and then that will also build and return a report element to show the view history. We're going to do that in a couple of different ways: a text view and a Gravatar if we have time. And so let's take a look at the completed solution. If you do this, what are you going to get? What's in it for me, right? So I've already implemented this solution on campfire.plantandapp.com, which again, if you're participating in Campfire, you'd be able to see exactly how this goes together and look at all the different parts and pieces. But let's take a look at what happens. So I am currently logged in on the site, and I've implemented this tracking on when you click in to view a contribution. So we click into view a contribution, and we can see all the people who are currently looking at this. And this is tied specifically to contribution number 33. So you see a different view depending on what contribution you're looking at. There's a hover built into it, so we can see that, that Dale visited, and it has just now. So we're doing a time element to figure out how long ago. And so let's take a look at what happens if we start up an incognito session and go to the same URL. Different browser window, and so now we see that we're having somebody who's not logged in visited just now, and that Dale Warner 9 seconds ago. But you can also see it up here, and then somebody else is oh yeah, Patrick jumped in, so we can see who other people. And if I were to log in on this site and pick a different user, so I'm going to be my personal email address. You can start spamming me now. You can see that it's showing here, but it's also building out on the page. So as people are viewing it, you can see. And so I'm going to close that out. So we have these hovers that show my user looked at it just now. This other user looked at it 2 seconds ago. This other happened 31 seconds ago. And that relies on an elapsed time tracking, and so that automatically kind of formats it into ago, 2 hours ago, 5 hours ago, 3 days ago, that kind of thing. So that's essentially what you're going to get if you get into this. Behind the scenes, there is an entity called track, which we'll take a look at just to kind of get an idea of what's happening. And then we're going to build this out here in just a second. So track shows that that a particular user ID is accessing a particular track code. So the contribution 33 track code is what we built, and when it happens. So every visit to the page ends up causing a record to be added to the track table, and then from there it's just generating a report. So all that's happening in a kind of very simple and elegant, again, workflows and tokens. And so I'm going to move this over to my other screen because I'm going to use it for reference as I build this out. But we are going to actually implement this on a clone of the community website. So I have community clone .com. So this is a very old version of our community website. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to try and work on a live site here today, because who knows what I would break. But we'll go to our clone. And so the idea that we're going to implement is that, for example, if you dive in on a particular question, so workflow token question that Jim and Anthony asked back in February, we're going to add an area up here that will show who's currently viewing it. And that's our target. And so we'll get started with that. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We're adding it to a clone of the community website, and it's going to be on the question details page. It's going to show viewers on this question details page. So here's the first part. We've got to add tracking, and so I'll talk about this and then we'll get in and do it. And I'm going to make sure I've got this up going here on this page. All right, so we're going to, I mentioned this display elapsed time function. It's going to show us how long has gone from from some past event to now. This is something that was added to the as a contribution to the Campfire website. So we're going to implement that on this site. And then we're going to add a track entity, which I showed you a little bit about what that looked like. Then we'll do a couple of workflows, one that will do a track, that will perform a track and record a page view. And then another one that's going to return the elapsed time for a given track. And that's Just going to make it easy to consume that and report it. And then we'll do a token, and we'll actually place that token as a tracking token on the page. And so that'll get the tracking done. And then peeking ahead, part 2, we're going to do the report so that we will create a simple text report that will show the viewers. And again, if we have time, we'll get into doing it by way of Gravatars like I showed in the demonstration. And then finally, the ability to automatically refresh that so you don't have to click anything to display the viewers. So that's where we're going. And so let's get started. First is this setup, the DisplayElapsedTime function. I am going to find my reference materials and bring them over here. So it's in the reference materials, but it's also, again, it's a contribution on Campfire, and you can find it there. This one happens to be added by me, but it's a SQL, and it just takes as input a time, and it compares it to the current time and returns that. So I'm going to copy this SQL and go to our target website, Community Clone, and in the SQL console, just remind you, if you don't have SQL console option shown on the left, you can activate that here in the General tab, enable or disable the SQL console. But we have the SQL console. We paste this SQL from the resources in, and it's going to create the function we need, DisplayElapsedTime. It's not going to do anything. We're not going to be able to see. It's going to return 0 results, but it will have created. If we try and run it again, we'll get an error because it says this thing already exists. So if for some reason it already existed in your database, if you previously used it, then you're not going to hurt anything. It just is going to give you this error message. But simply install that. That's part 1. And so we'll be using that, and I'll show you exactly how that works as we go forward. The next thing we're going to do is a track entity. So I'm going to we'll go to our entities, and this is the database that's going, or the table, the entity that's going to hold our data. So we'll do one. I'm going to create a namespace called tracking for everything that we're doing here. It's all going to be grouped together. So it's going to be called tracking. Select that. The name of it is going to be track, and plural is tracks. Just leaving tracks. That's the idea. Let's see, I guess we can display it in the menu for now, just to make it easy to get to. We'll hide it after a while because it really doesn't have any value, and we'll just let it show up in the main menu. For properties, we're going to just have 2 very simple ones, user ID, and I'm going to do that as an integer number. Just keeping my life simple here today. And that is going to be our display name. Something that if you click, you'll see it. We have to pick a display name. We're probably not going to use it very much that way. And then the second property is track code, and that's going to be a text field. And we'll make this searchable and sortable just in case we want to get a look at it. And we'll also make user ID filterable. That'll, sortable as well. So that will that'll define our database. Don't think we need any special permissions, so we'll skip the permissions for now and just save that. So again, this is going to give us a place to put our data, and if we look at track and I said if we refresh, it'll show up in our menu. So we have it here. We can navigate to it that way. And we have no data. So we could manually enter data here. It's just, again, the user ID and the track code. We're not going to do it. We're going to get started with our next piece, and we'll see data start to flow into that. So we're going to add a workflow called track, and that's going to record a page view and return a report. So find the model for that. So that is a workflow. Create a new workflow. It's going to be in the tracking namespace, so I'll select that. And the name of it is going to be track. And this is going to something like that. That's what this is going to do. And so there's going to be some inputs to this. There's really two. One is the track code. And this is going to be the unique, or the code that means what page you're viewing. So typically, in my case, I'm going to define it as a word and the ID of the question. But you can pick any track code that you want that represents something unique that you want to track on your system. So that's going to be a text field. And then the other one I'm going to do is going to be called output title. So this is going to control what the output looks like when we get to the point where we're doing output from this workflow. From a process point of view, the first thing that we want to do, we're going to, the output is going to be something called report, and so we'll initialize that. So in our context, we're going to create or update token, and what we want to do is initialize the report. It's just giving report a value, which is going to be blank. So we'll not put anything in the token value, and that's it. While I'm thinking about it, that we're actually going to output that exactly that way. So it's going to be report is going to be output, and it's going to get the value of the report token. So whatever gets assigned to the report in this process, that's what's going to get output. Eventually, that's going to be our display of Gravatars or who's visiting the page. So we're going, in a minute, we're going to be creating a new track record using the data that's been passed in. But because we're going to support non-logged in users, we're going to do a load user action. And so that is user. User identifier. I'm just going to use my email address. This will provide the authentication or the security necessary so that our create new track will work. And so we'll do a create new track now. So the track record, we don't have to provide a connection string. It's in our current database. And what we're going to do is store the user ID of the user that's doing this. So user ID is what we're going to pass to it. And in the case that it's blank, that they're not a logged in user, we're going to put a default value of 0. The track code is going to be whatever was passed into the workflow track code. So that will be a parameter that gets passed in. The output token is the ID of a record that gets created. We don't need to use it, so I'm not going to store it. And so we'll just save that. And then the next step, in a little while, we'll write the report section here, but for now, we'll just end. And now we can save and test this. So if we do a track code, and I'm just going to pick an arbitrary one with A and give it no output title, that's not being used yet. It runs very quickly. And if we look in our tracks table, we can see that user number 11 created a track code A. So this workflow is running. We can do it again and create another A and refresh. So every time we run it, we see a different result. We'll also create a B here just for fun. And so every time that runs, it creates a new track code. For convenience sake, I am going to modify this listing to show when this was created, because that'll help us kind of make sense of the data. It's behind the scenes in an entity. It already keeps a created date, created user. And so we're going to just modify this to show it. So we can add fields, and there's the created date is what I want to add. So we'll add this selected field, and maybe I'll just say created and format it as a date, where I can pick out a format. So I'm going to pick out a nice long format so that we can see down to the second, and I'm going to convert that to my time so it makes sense to me or whoever's viewing it. So now when we look at it, we can see that this thing happened Wednesday, 10:45, 10:42, and another one later, and another one later. So our tracks have create dates. Good. So keeping track of where we are, we've added a track entity, we've added a track workflow that tracks data, and we've added some test data. So now we're going to do this, the elapsed time for a track. It's a workflow that's going to get this elapsed time. So we have tracks, we have record IDs 1, 2, and 3, and we can use these as verification that this is working correctly. So we'll do a new workflow. The name of it is going to be elapsed time for track. We're still going to use tracking namespace. Provide the name. And this is going to be a very simple process. We need an ID, and I'm just going to simply keep it as a text. I guess it could be an integer. That probably would be best. See, this is where I zoom off script on my script over here on the left. It was a text. I'm going to live dangerously and call it an integer, but it doesn't matter. So we have an ID that's an integer coming in. It's a very simple process, which is a one SQL query that's going to get us the information we need. And the SQL query is going to be this. I actually need to put this into my reference materials as well. So let me do that so that you have it. So we are using that display elapsed time function on the create date field, where we're going to name that output as a go. From the track, where, and we need an ID. So the ID that we want is, we're going to pass the ID field here, which matches @ID. We're going to pass in the ID that came in from our input. The output of this thing is going to get stored in a field called ago. Doesn't matter what we call it, ago. And then that's all we're going to do from an output perspective. We're going to create an output called ago and pass that value. So let's see how this works. We have records 1, 2, and 3. And so if we save and test and pass it a 1, it says that happened 4 hours ago. I must be stuck with time difference on this system. That's unfortunate. Let's prove that out. Patrick, you were going to say something?
Not yet.
Okay. So yeah, this is different portal time. Let's see if I can straighten that out. Of course, it worked right in my test system. So I'm going to leave this to user time. And I'm going to look at my original SQL for elapsed time here, because it's comparing it to the UTC date. Display elapsed time is a UTC date field. This may be one of those things that we're not going to solve today. Yep. So I would have thought it would work, but UTC date -4. What is the create date?
Did you create it as local date time?
Well, it's created date, so.
Oh yeah, right.
Created date is a date time offset. And that's probably what we're seeing out. Nope. So yes is UTC, and yep, it should be. So this is not materially going to impact. I mean, unfortunately, we're not going to see the nice seconds ago kind of stuff, but it's not going to keep us from displaying this. Well, maybe I'll find it and fix it before this gets posted, and we'll have a little addendum. But sticking with where we are, the elapsed time for track is when we run it for user for ID 1 or 2, it's showing 4 hours ago. If it was aligned with the UTC date, it would show 4 minutes ago, 6 minutes ago, that kind of thing. So we'll find and fix it before this gets posted. Okay, so we have elapsed time for track basically running. And so now we can move on to the next spot. We're going to continue our tracking by by creating a track token that will represent or call this same track workflow. And then we'll paste it onto our form so that it will begin tracking when you go there. So when we go to tokens, I am going to create a new namespace. Interestingly, the token namespaces are different, so we have to actually create it. So that's going to also be the tracking namespace. And we're going to create a tracking token called track. The definition of this is it's going to point or run a workflow, and the workflow it's going to run is track. So the workflow and the token are named about the same. We're not going to do any caching or special options, so we'll just move right on to saving and testing this. And so the values, the save and test is good because it provides the values that go into the token. And so we can, for example, put in C here. And for now, we don't need any output title. This would be for something like the word history. We'll do it that way just to kind of make it make sense. But when we run it, nothing happens and we don't get any output. But if we go back and look at our tracks, we should now have a C. So running this token, yep, it does it. And there was the first one that said value. But here's the C record that got created. Good. So we now have a track token and we can place that on the page wherever we want to track. So we're going to go to our form and go into the question details page. So again, we'll pick on this workflow token parameters question that was posted a while ago. We're going to put a new form up in here just so that I don't have to touch any existing code on this page. We'll just keep it very clean. So it'll be a new form and it's going to go here in P25.2. So new form, place it here. And we will manage this form. Tab. Great. So we are going to add a static text that is going to be our, eventually it's going to show our history report, doesn't matter what we call it history report. And we're going to put our tracking token right in there. So whatever we want to track, we won't be tracking a code C, but it will be every view of the page will cause this token to refresh. And then what that does bring the question, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to track question details and we're going to pass it the question ID. So I'm just going to copy and paste here question details. And then, so it's the details is going to be the code we pass, and then the get D. And so now every time we view this page, it's going to create a code, question details, whatever. So let's test that theory, and then I can't leave this form unnamed, so this is going to be the tracking form. So we view the page, tracking form is here, doesn't show anything yet because we haven't output anything yet. But if we look at our tracks, hopefully we'll start to get records here. So now question detail 1734. If we navigate up to our forum and pick a different question, we should get, so this one is 1733. And so every page ends up putting a track with a date and time next to it. And so we've already solved one of the things we said we're going to solve, right? That if you want to do a security audit, and you don't have to display anything on the page, you just want to know who visited, when, then this has accomplished the purpose. The tracks listing is recording this. Whatever page you put a tracking token on, we can use it as easily add it to the feature requests or anywhere else with a different track code, and you would be able to track who's viewing it. So in the scenario where you had, for example, secure data that people should only look at if they have a reason to do so, like a social security number or pay rate, you could track who's looking at that page and use that as part of an audit. So we're tracking is going on. So now we're going to go to the part 2, which is being able to have a report. And so the first report that we're going to do is a track report that is a simple HTML element that's going to show using hover. So it'll say history up the top. You'll be able to hover it and see it. So let's see if I can build that one out. And so, yes, here we go. This is going to be done in the form of a workflow. It's going to be a new workflow, again, in the tracking namespace. And it's going to be called track report by text. And this is just, we could call it anything, but I'm going to have 2 different ones here if I succeed. Track report text, and this is just that. And from an input standpoint, we're just going to have the track code. Whatever page track code you're on, you pass it that track code, and it's going to show you the summarized information for that track code. The process for this is that we're going to have create a token that is going to be report. And so we're again going to have a report that has a blank value. So we're making sure that we have an empty token to load information into. And in the same way, we will output the report as value is just going to be called, go out in a value called report. So the other steps that we're going to need here is that we're going to run a SQL that's based on this track code, and the SQL we're going to run is beyond the scope. We'll talk about it a little bit, but it's a little beyond the scope of what we're going to do today. But that is in the reference materials. So, it's not that. It's a create list from SQL because we're going to iterate through it. We need it as a list. And what we're going to actually do is create a variable or a token called report list. So I'm just going to, I like to name what's going on in the title, and so report list is going to be created. So this SQL is coming from here. So just very quickly, what it's doing is the table that it's looking at is app track, the track table that we built. It's returning a user ID, their maximum track ID, so the most recent track ID that they did. We're also joining over to the user table to either get their username. If they're not logged in, that join is going to be null, and so it's going to return not logged in as their username. But either way, we get out a user ID, their last ID, and a username. And the only thing we have to pass it in is a track code. So we will call this @ track code so that we can pass it in through these bindings. And the track code that we want to do is the one that came in from our input. So we're passing it in an input. We are going to get a report list out of it. And so we'll save that. And so then when you have a list, typically execute actions for each list entity. That's going to be the thing that lets us walk through that. And so the list name that we want to walk through is called report list. And so now this is where we're going to build up for every user that's represented in this report. So, and I guess I could demonstrate here this might help to visualize a little bit. If we look at this SQL that I've got here, we can go to the SQL viewer and see what's being returned, SQL console. So paste that, and we'll just say that we're looking for the track code of A. Some of our test data had A. So we can see it returns a user ID 11. The last ID that was created was ID number 2, and the username that did that. So this is the information that we're going to get back, and we're going to iterate through. All right. So we're iterating through report list. What do we want to do? Well, the first thing we want to do is to get the elapsed time for that last code. So we're going to execute our elapsed time for track workflow to get the elapsed time. It's going to return us a go as a field. So the ID that we want to do is that last ID that is coming in from report list. Last ID is the highest one, so it'll have the most recent time. And the go field that gets returned, we're storing it in an output call or a context token called go. So this gives us that. And then from here, we're going to build up the report. So we're going to create an update token, and I'm going to be, let's see, a little bit fancy here. If when the report is blank to start with, we're just going to create the report is going to be this. It's going to be the report list username and then parenthesis, and then grab this a go field. So it's just going to assign this as the value. Since I want to insert a comma when the report is not blank, we'll do this again. And so I'm just going to export that one and copy it. A little cramped here on the windows, but we'll import that same one and do it very similar. So if the report is not equal to blank, and because of vagaries here. I have to move this above. So when the report is not equal to blank, we're going to make it be very similar, but it's going to be the value of the existing report plus a comma space. So so when the report is empty, it's going to get the name and the go, and that's what's going to be returned. When it's not empty, it's going to add on a comma and the same type of value. So provides a nice comma delimited list. And I went to this extra effort, so there's not a final comma anyway. And then from here we can end. So if we save and test this and run it with an A, the report says Dale Warner 4 hours ago. Again, we talked about it should not be 4 hours ago, so it should be something else. But looking at our data in tracks, if we look only at A's, the most recent one was number 2, and so now we could run it again, and all this data, it's all only one user gets returned, so there's not a lot of variation, but we could run it for a different track code like question 1734, and that would work. So let's try that one. But we can just quickly run a report with this workflow and get the data. So I guess to help visualize this a little bit, let's add another code manual here. We'll put in a user ID 0, which would be a not logged in user, and the same question ID 1734. And so we'll have just this dummy data for 0. So now we should get 2 things being returned from this report. So run it. And so now we get not logged in happened 4 hours ago. Dale Warner happened 4 hours ago. So we get this report. And it's only now necessary to get this out onto the as output onto the token, and that token will show up. I can see already by the time we're not going to have time to get to Gravatars, but it's not a huge leap. So let's see. We can at least get this one implemented. So we will go back to our original workflow, our track workflow, and edit. And I'm going to do this as yeah, we'll just add it simply. We don't get too we'll execute the track report. We're going to pass it our track code that came in and that we just reported. It's part of our inputs. The output is going to be called report, and report is what we're outputting. So if we save and test this with an A, now the output shows the A track code report. We just ran that here. And so now, having changed this, we go to our community portal. Where are we? Too many things open. Community portal. And it should start showing the track code report. We dig in here. And so it shows Dale Warner 4 hours ago, not logged in 4 hours ago. It happened on this particular one. If we be far more convincing if it weren't saying 4 hours ago, but in any case, we're showing tracking. So now there's a nice little HTML thing that I really should do. Let me find it here. To clean up this track report in text, because I said I wanted to do it as a hover. it's going to be in track workflow. I'm going to close a couple of things down here so I don't get lost. So the track report is showing it's outputting to the report, and it had that list of people. We can add another context variable that says that can make this nice little HTML adjustment that I was talking about. So the report is going to be this. We take the value of the report and stuff it into a div that has a title, and then we're using our output title that came in as input, so that this is how the report is going to be named. Right. So if we save this and then take a look at it now, instead of just listing out everything, it's going to say history, and you can hover it and see the list of history. So rather than the history kind of becoming a huge screen element, it's just something that you can hover. And then finally, to remind why it says history, if we look in our form and manage our form, the history report had this token, and it said tracking it by this, but the output title is history. We could call it, for example, new history here instead, and that would be the title. It's just passing whatever is in that token to output. So new history, we can hover it and see this stuff. So since we didn't get to Gravatars, I'm going to drag this in from the Campfire site. For those of you that have access to Campfire, you'll be able to see it here. So you would go to contributions and click in on a contribution and see that it shows them as Gravatars. This is taking advantage of, if we look in the configuration on tokens, in tracking, there's a tracking token called Get Gravatar. I believe this is courtesy of our frequent flyer Ben, as part of something else that was done in the community. But I modified it a little bit, but Get Gravatar goes out to the Gravatar site and returns, based on the email address, the avatar for the person. So we see the person, whoever is logged in, and then I modified it a little bit so that the hover shows the time frame when the login or the activity happened. Okay, so in our progress, let's see, we got most of the way there. We have a simple track report. You have the Gravatar one that you can research on Campfire if you really care. And then the automatic refresh is just a little bit of JavaScript code that, in my case, what I did is I have a hidden button on this form, and every time you push it, it refreshes this this content. And then I call that button with a little bit of JavaScript code every, in this case, 10 seconds, just to demonstrate very quickly, but perhaps you do it a little less frequently. But the idea is when somebody comes in on the same thing you're looking at, it'll just, it'll appear to just appear without any interaction, because that form is refreshing from time to time. Okay, that's all the parts and pieces. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I'm sorry that we had the issue with time tracking, but elapsed time, but that's the way that it goes here. Hopefully I'll have an answer for you on that one. In the meantime, happy low coding, and we will see you again next week, or if you join us for Campfire on Friday. Thanks.